A philosopher, like a formed philosopher, not of the kind of a drunkard in a bar, that is thinking about life and speaking to strangers. And I often see people nowadays speaking about science and about, uh, truth, validity, and they often don't understand what is behind, what is the philosophical or scientific or even aesthetical discourse behind these theories. First of all, what should we call truth? How can we define truth? Yeah. I wish to talk here about the Descartes scientific method, which was one of the first attempts to define what is a scientific theory. Although obviously science in Western lands or in Occidental lands has started more than 2,500 years ago, in my opinion. Although some philosophers such as, let me see here, in this small library which I have here, the first philosophers, the Presocratic and Sophists, a new translation by Robin Waterfield. So, according to Robin Waterfield, which I have quoted in some of my articles, which I published privately, yeah, uh, these uh, sycophant academicians like him, for instance, they will say that the first philosophers, although some of them were rightly so scientists, they were making probably even experiments of density of matter, such as observing that frozen water is not uh, in the same state of liquid water and vapor water, yes, or gaseous water. But the idea that is that he thinks that the first philosophers were not truly scientists, and he even tries to lie, because this is a blatant lie, that there was no science in antiquity, which is completely false. Yeah, the empirical method of analyzing empirically things and also using mathematics to calculate and measure things was applied almost universally, at least by the time of the Hellenistic period, which is about 300 years before Christ, or this common era. Yeah. So the idea is that they had literally precision clocks that measured the position of the planets around the sun, because the sun at the center of the solar system was a hypothesis that some scientists such as Aristarchus and even Archimedes believed. You know. So the idea is that what is truth? Well, in a philosophical point of view, there is, for instance, the theory of Plato or Platon, as it is, the name is pronounced in ancient Greek. The tripartite theory of truth, if I'm not mistaken, which was hypothetically stated, although intuitively considered true, in the Theaetetus or Theaetetus or Theaetetus in more American English, yes, less Latinized, which was the name of a friend of Platon, if I'm not mistaken, and a disciple of Socrates. I may say bullshit, but I think I am correct in saying these things. But the history behind the book, because the dialogues of Plato have always a story behind, almost always at least. And there it is stated that the most probable theory of truth according to Plato is that if you have an opinion which you think is true, and it is justified by you as being true, this or a opinion which is true and justified is a theory of truth. A theory of truth about anything that you may be thinking about. It can be about water, it can be about hydrodynamics, mechanics, about politics, about books, about the categories that divide human beings, like small human beings, tall human beings, beautiful, handsome human beings, ugly, hideous ones, you know. So the idea is that basically what you have is that you have the fact that you have this theory that which is of Plato, and then you have, for instance, another great theory which is from a disciple of Plato, which is Aristoteles, or Aristotle in English, which states that if you have a concept, such as a logical definition of something, like human beings are bipedal animals, mammal animals that are able to speak. You have this definition about human beings, a general definition, logical definition. And thus, you have specimens, you have exemplars of human beings. And then you say, there is a human being, like John is a human being, Mary is a human being, Carl is a human being, Johann is a human being, and so on and so on. All of these identifications of the concept with something which is real, that exists, is a truth. Yeah? And then there will be a theory that talks about the most general things that will be the most truthful of all theories, and not just identifications of specimens, but about the essences or the highest truths about things in reality. It can be even mathematical truths which are not posited in the material world. Yeah? So the idea is that these are two great theories of truth. Theories of truth. What basically is a theory that defines what is that it can be said that is true. Yeah? And thus, most people, nonetheless, take for granted that this is irrelevant, but it is not, because there are other theories about truth, of course, that are regulated by principles such as the principle of identity, the principle of non-contradiction, the principle of the third excluded, and the bivalence principle, which are logical principles. And other theories have different principles. Not only these four, but sometimes they don't have the principle of identity, or then they don't have in all cases, the principle of non-contradiction. And the idea is that through logical reasoning in defining your logic, you can have a different theory of truth about physical things or immaterial things such as numbers or squares or parabolas, yeah? Spheres, which are not physical things, yeah? So the idea is that when I see people talking about truth, they don't define what is truth, yeah, and they don't define what is validity. We could say that validity is a consequence of premises, yeah. You have basically in a syllogism you have two premises and one conclusion. You have, for instance, all human beings are mortals. Socrates is a human being. This is the second sentence. You can say, because the syllogism is always with a if particle. So, if all human beings are mortal, and if Socrates is a human being, then Socrates must be mortal. And there are possible refutations to this conclusion, but the idea is that the conclusion of this argument is valid and probably is true if it is true that all human beings are mortal, or if it is true that Socrates is a human being. But if he is a human being and all human beings are mortals, therefore it derives that Socrates is mortal. Yeah, something like that. So, but it is that this is a valid argument, and there are valid arguments that are untrue or they're not truthful. I can say, for instance, and this is my philosophical opinion, okay? Like you can say unicorns, like let us just say this, like all unicorns are winged. Pegasus is a unicorn. Obviously, Pegasus is not a unicorn, yeah? But let's just say that Pegasus is a unicorn. Thus, Pegasus is a winged animal, a winged creature, whatever you call it. So, you say, like, if all unicorns are winged creatures, and Pegasus is a unicorn, thus Pegasus is a winged creature. But all of that is a valid argument, but from the point of view of Aristotle or Aristotle, it's a false argument, because there is no correspondence of the concept of unicorns with things which are real. So the idea is that obviously there are things that can make sense or can be logical to be said, but they don't. This don't make these things true. Yeah. So the idea is that this is the paradigm of antiquity, and then there were Neoplatonic theories, there were Stoic theories of philosophy and science, there were the mathematicians, there were the engineering sciences or physical sciences, medicine and everything. And there were the peripatetic sciences, the peripatetic philosophies of Aristotle. There were the Epicurists, the skeptics, and other schools, like as I think I have quoted already, the Neo-Pythagoreans and the Pythagoreans. Yeah. So the idea is that this means that you basically have, like, in antiquity, many schools searching for truth in a logical, rational way, including exploring nature mathematically and physically, yeah, empirically as well. So this means that there was science, without a doubt. Yeah, there were even, like, descriptions of photograph machines, like the camera oscura, which is the principle of the analogic photograph, yeah, or the camera, yeah. And even Aristotle, if I'm not mistaken, Aristotle describes this, yeah. So there is no doubt that that science was going on for a long time, and then obviously there existed in Platonism and the foundations of science, yeah, which started more in a complex way with Plato, yeah. The idea that you have basically an idea or an assumption. You have an opinion, yeah? You have an assumption. This opinion may be true or false. So there is perhaps about something which is in the reality of mankind, which is a mythos, or perhaps a hypothesis, that is a supposition. You suppose something may be true. Let us investigate this is true or false. So, or let's investigate if it makes sense. Yeah. So basically, there was in antiquity the idea that all opinion is a supposition. All opinion about something which is perhaps true or false is a hypothesis. Yeah, so why things fall to the ground when we leave them without no support, if they are lifted above the ground? Why rocks fall the side of a cliff when they are like dislodging themselves because of some force or the action of gravity? And then what is gravity, you know? So there is that there were many explanations why these things happen, but the idea is that it just remains true that um, you have this basically a principle of doubt, like you doubt things and you have some skepticism, and then you ask yourself, what's the cause of this? What may be causing this? Why this thing is happening as it is happening? Or why squares have 4 equal sides? Or how do I define a square? What is the Pythagorean theorem? Why it is valid or true? Why theorems of mathematics are true? Yeah? If they are real or if they are not real, if there is any reality in mathematics propositions, or if we can know things directly or only indirectly, you know, which are metaphysical questions, which are questions that go beyond just experience. They are like abstract questions that go beyond the analysis of the empirical. You cannot test them empirically. You must reason them and then discover them by just reasoning. Yeah, which is basically through the faculties of the mind considered classically as immaterial. Yeah. So the idea is that this means that most people, they don't know all about that which I'm discussing here, because they don't have studied philosophy or the methodology of science. And even scientists, they themselves, they don't study philosophy or science anymore from a point of view of theory of science and a theory of philosophical science, or like a philosophy of science. They don't study the foundations of science anymore. Not even scientists anymore study. And what's most astounding when I was talking about argumentation and about conclusion and premises, scientists, they don't know logic anymore. At least those who are biologists or physicists, they don't know anymore logic. At best, they will see some logic in a classroom of mathematics, and perhaps not even then. Yeah. So they don't know how to logically reason. And so the idea is that I often see a lot of ignorance and a lot of bullshit about science and the scientific method, validity, truthfulness, true sciences or true theories. And the idea is that, as let me see here, I think his name is Ivar Gaever. He's a superconductivity science engineer and physicist, I think, or at least an engineer. Yeah, here. Ivar Gaever lectures. Lindau Mediathek is a site which shows at least one video which was recorded of him talking about the Lindau Mediathek, which was a lecture by him, which he speaks against the dogma of the climate change. Yeah, that the so-called dogma of the climate change cannot be questioned according to media, the great media, which is not even great either way, but it is like the mainstream media, the big media. They abhor the possibility of questioning certain dogmas that they want to sell to the public. But in fact, as Ivar says, there is no uncontrovertible proposition in science. That is, you cannot state an idea which cannot be questioned in science. If there is something in science that cannot be questioned, it is religion. It is not science anymore. That's the same procedure which condemned in the times of Descartes, which we'll read here about the scientific method, condemned Galileo Galilei, which was the father of modern science. But the science which was reigning at that time was dictated by the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church simply could say, and even kill people. And they will say nowadays that they haven't killed nobody in history, but they condemn the persons, and then they state kill the persons which were condemned by the Catholic Church. So obviously the fathers of the church and the so-called scholastic thinkers, they persecuted people who thought differently about the dogmas of the time. And so when I say this, is that what is truly now, we are going out of antiquity and the Middle Ages, and we are going to basically the Descartes scientific method. I will read here, you know. It's basically a summarization of Brave browser, you know. And I will even put the link. It's based on, let me see here, the sources. It is the internet philosophy encyclopedia. I think it's also Academy Edu. No, Stanford Encyclopedia, philosophy, Plato. I think it's called like that. And then here it is Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Wikipedia, Wire.com, engines .egr.uh.edu, Quora.com, and then there are other sources, other two sources. But these two first, the Plato Stanford Edu and the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, they are, I can say like this, at least sometimes they are respectful of what can be called as truly argumentative, not exactly in a pedantic way, but correct way of argumentation, like a solid argumentation. Although oftentimes they will say things which are just ridiculous, especially when it is about politics, because often they don't really consider all the points that one can argue favorably or against something. If they choose to argue against, they will try to demolish the argument. Yeah. But mostly what I see in these encyclopedias, not Wikipedia, which is ridiculous, what I see in the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy and Plato Stanford Edu is solid argumentation. Yeah. So the book of Descartes, which he published, let me see here, when this was published. It was obviously in the 17th century, yeah, that is 1600s. Let me see exactly the year. It was published in 1637, okay? Let us return here. 1637, and it is called Discours de la méthode pour bien conduire sa raison et chercher la vérité dans les sciences, which means rightly conducting discourse on the method of rightly conducting one's reason and of seeking truth in the sciences. Yeah. So what are the key principles of the scientific method by Descartes, which have influenced a lot Newton and Leibniz and many other thinkers subsequently? First, doubt and skepticism. Descartes advocates for doubting everything, including his own senses and previous knowledge, to establish a firm foundation for knowledge. This methodological skepticism allows him to question assumptions and avoid potential errors. Clear and distinct ideas. Descartes emphasizes the importance of clear and distinct ideas which can be apprehended through reason alone. He argues that only such ideas can provide a secure basis for knowledge. Inductive and deductive reasoning. Descartes deploys both inductive and deductive reasoning in his scientific method. He uses induction to gather data and observations, and then deduces general principles and laws from these observations. So inductions are basically empirical data, or like tests. You test an idea, you test a hypothesis, you try to refute the hypothesis, and if you cannot refute the hypothesis, probably it may be that the hypothesis is true physically, and then you may deduct a law out of it. Yes, like it must be true that the acceleration of a falling body without any resistance to the soil is a quadratic law. Yeah, it's a quadratic acceleration. That is, you have, for instance, the acceleration close to the surface of the Earth. It's approximately 9.89 meters per second squared. So basically, it is a quadratic velocity. Yeah. So as the derivative of a parabola is basically if the parabola is x squared, like f of x is equals to x squared, or y is equals to x squared, you'll have basically 2x, yeah, as the derivative, which is, if I'm not mistaken, the rate of change of velocity. So you'll have, by each second it passes, 2 times the velocity. So this means that I may be saying bullshit. I will study physics probably next year, like officially, in a university course, but I am a philosopher, yeah, former philosopher. And so it means that probably you have in 5 seconds you have 10 times that velocity of a initial point of position. So you have in from 1 second to the other, the second, you have the double of the velocity. In fact, let me correct this. It's not 10, 5 times, 5 times 2. it would be the double in the second, the double of the second to the third, and then the double of the third to the double of the second to the third, the double of the third to the fourth, the double of the fourth to the fifth. I may sing bullshit, but I think perhaps I'm correct, you know? So this, let's just assume this is a hypothesis. And this is derivable mathematically, like you can derive mathematically. Galileo Galilei discovered this law empirically, yeah? But you can find other by other means this. Yeah, you can find a prioristically, or like a priori, or a priori, or abstractly. You can find by principles of logic or mathematics, and then you must test it to see if it is true. Yeah, so this is what Descartes is saying, you know. And then experimentation. The four parts, yeah, experimentation, which I was talking about. Descartes, while Descartes does not emphasize experimentation as much as other scientists of his time, he does recognize its importance in testing hypotheses and verifying theories. And then fifth, mathematization. Descartes believed that mathematical methods could be applied to all areas of knowledge, including physics and metaphysics. He developed analytic geometry, which connected algebra and geometry, and saw this as a way of establishing, as a way to establish a universal language for science. So basically, the idea is that also it is true that probably Fermat, let me see here. Pierre de Fermat, yeah? Probably it was Pierre de Fermat that discovered the analytic geometry, yeah? But it's possible that Descartes plagiarized him, and he also plagiarized Snell, or I think all the other scientists. But the idea is that Descartes was a innovative philosopher. He was an innovative philosopher. He was someone who contributed to science and to philosophy, although he may have plagiarized some people. That's my understanding. Like Europeans, not like some black people say that he may have plagiarized, I don't know, like some warrior in some tribe, primitive tribe in Congo, you know, but or an Indian in Americas. No, he did not. But truly, he probably was a plagiarizer, you know. So and then there are rules of the direction of the mind. Descartes outlined 4 rules for his scientific method. First, never accept anything as true unless it is clearly and distinctly perceived. This rule emphasizes the importance of clear and distinct ideas and the need to verify knowledge through reason. Second, divide problems into smaller parts. Descartes advocates for breaking down complex problems into simpler, more manageable components to facilitate understanding and solution. Third, solve the simplest problems first. He recommends starting with the easiest problems and gradually moving on the more complex ones, building on previously established knowledge. 4. Make comprehensive enumerations and general reviews. This rule emphasizes the importance of thoroughness and completeness in scientific inquiry, ensuring that all possible factors are considered and accounted for. So it's a solid theory, you see, of science, you know. And then here there is comparison with Bacon, which was an empiricist, which is another theory of scientific theory. The evolution of since Descartes and Bacon and others, and Newton and Leibniz and many other scientists. The idea is that it remained the fact that you must define what is your theory of truth, what is your theory of science, and also don't start from zero, because we cannot just start absolutely from zero, you know? From where we will start your theory, you know? Because then people say, no, this is established. There is no established science. What you have are theories and some data and evidence. The data and evidence may corroborate empirically the theory, but that does not mean that the theory is refutable. You can falsify correctly and counter-argue against a theory, you know? So here, one last part of the video, I will show an article that was published in Springer, yes, by a soul called George R. Barrio, Consensus Science and Peer Review. He is just like, the article, you know. It's practically notes, you know. He says, I recently reviewed a lecture on science, politics, and consensus by Michael Crichton, a physician, producer, and writer. Gave at the California Institute of Technology of Pasadena, in Pasadena, California, USA, on the January 17th, 2003. I was struck by the timeliness of its content. I am quite certain that most of us have been, in one way or another, exposed to the concept and consequences of consensus science. In fact, scientific reviewers of journal articles or grant applications, typically in biomedical research, may use the term exempli gratia. It is the consensus in the field, often as a justification for shutting down ideas not associated with their beliefs. I have always had a negative gut reaction to the concept of consensus science. But Michael Crichton explained it best when he said, I regard consensus science as an extremely pernicious development that ought to be stopped cold in its tracks. Historically, the claim of consensus has been the first refuge of scoundrels. It is a way to avoid debates by claiming that the matter is already settled. Whenever you hear consensus of scientists agree on something or other, reach for your wallet because you are being had. And he continues, let's be clear. The work of science has nothing whatsoever to do with consensus. Consensus is business of politics. Science, on the contrary, requires only one investigator who happens to be right, which means that he or she has results that are verifiable by reference to the real world. In science, consensus is irrelevant. What are relevant are reproducible results. The greatest scientists in history are great precisely because they broke with consensus. There is no such a thing as consensus in science. If it's consensus, it isn't science. If it is science, it isn't consensus, period. It is indeed hard to disagree with Mr. Crichton. The historical track record of scientific consensus is nothing but dismal. Many examples can be cited, but there are some classical ones. Nicholas Copernicus and his followers Galileo Galilei experienced the effects of consensus when they advanced theories that the planet Earth was not the center of the universe. The 16th and 17th centuries were not the right time to go against established dogmas, as we said before. Today, the methods of exacting consensus have changed, but the result could be the same: the death of the spirit. The use and abuse of consensus science is at least partially responsible for the current crisis in the scientific and medical peer review system. Although peer review may be considered one of the sacred pillars of scientific edifice, it has been under fire for some time now because peer review controls access to publications and funding, thus bringing the problem into a sharp focus. On one extreme, some believe that the current peer review system is a non-validated charade whose processes generate results little better than thus chance. Responding to generalized concerns, the NIH has recently produced new rules for granting writing and reviews. Grant writing and reviews, mainly with the intent to stimulate formulation of new ideas. But in the end, it is us who must forcefully strive for the honest debate of truthful facts for the benefit of all. It is our responsibility as scientists, physicians, reviewers, and/or editors to be alert and always remember that consensus is invoked only in situations where science is not solid enough. Nobody says, here is the bullshit of the article, yeah, of the author. Nobody says consensus of scientists agree that E equals mass times celerity squared, which is a formula which was not discovered by Einstein. And this formula may be questioned if it is exactly the exact limit of, that is the velocity of light. Nobody says that consensus is that the sun is 93 million miles away. It would never occur to anyone to speak that way, Mr. Christian. So then there is the open access. This article is distributed under the terms of Creative Commons Attribution, non-commercial license. So the idea is that this is an article I read in its entirety, basically. So the idea is that that's what I wanted to say, you know. What I understand as science is that if one has a good argument, a really good argument, against a theory or against a so-called fact, and if he refutes that, probably the explanation that was given to explain that so-called fact is not true anymore. Yeah? So the argument can be an empirical argument, a logical argument, a mathematical argument, and thus you have a different theory now, or you are in need of a new theory. You know? That's it. So I thank you for watching this, you know, and see you later. Bye bye.